The warm, Los Angeles sun cast a golden glow over the city as Jamel Rowan adjusted his crisp police uniform, a proud smile playing on his lips. At 32, he had it all: a promising career as a respected officer in the LAPD, and now, the love of his life, Martha, was about to become his wife. As he stood before the mirror in his modest apartment, Jamel couldn't help but feel that everything was falling into place. Little did he know that in just 48 hours, his world would come crashing down in a maelstrom of violence, betrayal, and a dark secret from his past. Jamel Rowan's story began long before that fateful day. Born and raised in the heart of South Central Los Angeles, he had seen firsthand the struggles of his community. From a young age, he dreamed of making a difference, of being the change he wanted to see in his neighborhood. It was this burning desire that led him to join the Los Angeles Police Department. Rising through the ranks with determination and integrity, Jamel quickly earned a reputation as a fair and compassionate officer. His colleagues admired his ability to connect with the community, to see beyond the badge and the uniform to the human beings on both sides of the law. It was during a routine patrol in Limerick Park that Jamel first met Martha Johnson. She was a kindergarten teacher, her warm brown eyes and gentle smile catching his attention as she ushered a group of excited children across the street. Their eyes met, and in that moment, something sparked between them. Their courtship was a whirlwind of shared dreams and stolen moments between Jamel's demanding shifts and Martha's dedication to her students. They found in each other a kindred spirit, both committed to uplifting their community and creating a better future for the next generation. As Jamel slipped the simple gold band onto Martha's finger during their intimate ceremony, he felt a sense of completeness he'd never known before. Surrounded by their closest friends and family, they exchanged vows of love, loyalty, and a shared vision for their future. The reception was a joyous affair, filled with laughter, music, and the warm embraces of loved ones. Jamel's partner on the force, Officer Darnell Washington, raised a toast to the happy couple, his voice thick with emotion as he spoke of Jamel's unwavering dedication to both his job and his new bride. As the newlyweds swayed to their first dance, Martha whispered in Jamel's ear, "I can't wait to start our life together." Jamel pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her perfume, feeling the softness of her skin against his. In that moment, he truly believed that nothing could ever come between them. But even as they celebrated their union, a shadow loomed on the horizon. Unbeknownst to the blissful couple, a pair of eyes watched from the darkness, filled with a mixture of pain, jealousy, and a dangerous obsession. As the sun rose on the day after their wedding, Jamel and Martha Rowan basked in the glow of newlywed bliss. They had taken a few days off for a short honeymoon, planning to explore the hidden gems of Los Angeles as tourists in their own city. But before they could embark on their adventure, Jamel received a call that would set in motion a chain of events leading to tragedy. The voice on the other end of the line belonged to Sergeant Andre Coleman, Jamel's superior officer and mentor. "Jamel, I hate to do this to you, especially now, but we've got a situation. I need you to come in." Jamel's brow furrowed as he listened to the details. A series of break-ins had been reported in their precinct, all following a similar pattern. The perpetrators seemed to have inside knowledge of the victims' schedules and security systems. The implication was clear: they were dealing with a potential dirty cop. As he hung up the phone, Jamel turned to Martha, apology written all over his face. She smiled understandingly, squeezing his hand. "Go. Do what you need to do. We have our whole lives ahead of us." With a quick kiss and a promise to return soon, Jamel headed to the precinct, unaware that this decision would set the stage for the tragedy to come. At the station, Jamel immersed himself in the case files, poring over reports and witness statements. As he delved deeper, a nagging feeling began to grow in the pit of his stomach. The modus operandi, the timing of the break-ins, it all seemed eerily familiar. His mind wandered back to a time he'd tried hard to forget, to a woman he'd once loved and the mistakes that had nearly cost him everything. Lydia Carter had come into Jamel's life like a whirlwind 5 years ago, when he was still a rookie cop trying to prove himself. She was beautiful, passionate, and as dedicated to community activism as Jamel was to law enforcement. Despite their different approaches, they shared a common goal of making their neighborhood a better place. Their relationship had been intense, fueled by a shared desire for change and a physical attraction that was hard to ignore. But as time went on, Jamel began to see a darker side to Lydia. Her activism took on a more radical tone, and she started associating with a group that called themselves the Awakened. At first, Jamel had dismissed the Awakened as harmless idealists, but he soon realized they were something far more sinister. Under the guise of spiritual enlightenment and social justice, the group was involved in illegal activities, using their members to gather information and carry out crimes against those they deemed oppressors. When Jamel confronted Lydia about her involvement, she tried to recruit him, arguing that they could change the system from within. "Think about it, Jamel," she had pleaded, her eyes bright with fervor. "With your position in the force and our network, we could really make a difference." But Jamel couldn't be swayed. His belief in the law and his duty as an officer were too deeply ingrained. The argument that followed was explosive, ending with Lydia storming out of his life, or so he thought. Weeks later, Jamel discovered that Lydia was pregnant. Despite the turmoil of their breakup, he was determined to do right by his child. But when he reached out to Lydia, she rebuffed him, claiming that she and the baby were better off without him and his corrupt system. Jamel had tried to fight for his rights as a father, but Lydia disappeared before he could take legal action. The last he'd heard, she had left Los Angeles, taking his unborn child with her. Now, as he stared at the case files before him, Jamel couldn't shake the feeling that the past he'd tried so hard to leave behind was coming back to haunt him. The break-ins, the insider knowledge, it all pointed to tactics he'd seen the Awakened use before. With a heavy heart, Jamel realized he needed to share this information with Sergeant Coleman. But as he stood up to seek out his superior, a commotion at the front desk caught his attention. A young officer was trying to calm a visibly agitated woman. As Jamel approached, he felt the blood drain from his face. Standing there, her eyes wild and her voice raised, was Lydia Carter, the woman he'd never thought he'd see again. Their eyes met across the room, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then Lydia's lips curved into a smile that sent chills down Jamel's spine. "Hello, Jamel," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "It's been a long time." As Jamel stood frozen, the weight of his past pressing down on him, he couldn't have known that this encounter was just the beginning. The next 24 hours would test his loyalty, challenge his beliefs, and ultimately lead to a confrontation that would shatter the life he'd worked so hard to build. The precinct buzzed with tension as Jamel led Lydia to an interview room, acutely aware of the curious glances from his colleagues. As they sat across from each other, the air thick with unspoken words and buried emotions, Jamel struggled to maintain his professional composure. "Why are you here, Lydia?" he asked, his voice low and controlled. Lydia leaned back, a sardonic smile playing on her lips. "Can a mother want her child to know their father?" The words hit Jamel like a physical blow. "The child? My child?" he stammered, his carefully constructed facade crumbling. "Our daughter," Lydia corrected, her eyes glinting with something Jamel couldn't quite decipher. "Her name is Zora. She's 4 now, and she's starting to ask questions about her daddy." Jamel's mind reeled. A daughter. He had a daughter he'd never met, never held. The weight of lost time pressed down on him, threatening to suffocate him. But even as his heart ached with this new knowledge, a part of him remained wary. This was Lydia, after all, the woman who had disappeared without a trace, denying him any chance of being a father. "Why now, Lydia?" he asked, fighting to keep his voice steady. "After all this time, why come back now?" Lydia's expression softened, a hint of vulnerability showing through her tough exterior. "I've changed, Jamel. The Awakened. It wasn't what I thought it was. I see that now. I want Zora to have a chance at a normal life, away from all that, and I want her to know her father." As Lydia spoke, Jamel's trained eye caught the slight tremor in her hands, the way her gaze darted nervously to the door. She was scared, he realized. But of what? Before he could press further, there was a knock at the door. Sergeant Coleman entered, his face grave. "Rowan, a word?" Excusing himself, Jamel stepped outside with his superior. Coleman's next words sent a chill down his spine. "We've got a problem. Coleman said in a low voice. That woman in there? She's been linked to a string of robberies across the city. High-end stuff, inside jobs. Ring any bells? Jamel's mind raced back to the case files he'd been reviewing earlier. The break-ins, the insider knowledge, it all suddenly made terrible sense. The awakened, he breathed. Coleman nodded grimly. We think so. And now she's here, talking to you. Care to explain? At that moment, Jamel knew he had a choice to make. He could reveal his past with Lydia, potentially jeopardizing his career and his new marriage. Or he could stay silent, protecting himself, but possibly letting a dangerous criminal go free. Taking a deep breath, Jamel made his decision. He told Coleman everything, his relationship with Lydia, her involvement with the awakened, and the child he'd never known. As he spoke, he could see the disappointment and concern warring on his mentor's face. This is a mess, Rowan, Coleman said when Jamel finished. But I appreciate your honesty. For now, we need to keep her here. If she's involved in these robberies, she might lead us to the rest of the group. As they re-entered the interview room, Lydia's eyes narrowed, sensing the shift in atmosphere. What's going on? She demanded. Miss Carter, Coleman began, his tone professional. We have some questions about your recent activities and your association with a group known as the Awakened. The color drained from Lydia's face. For a moment, Jamel saw real fear in her eyes. Then, quick as a flash, she bolted for the door. What followed was chaos. Lydia, with the desperate strength of a cornered animal, fought her way past Coleman and into the bullpen. Jamel gave chase, his heart pounding as he weaved through startled officers and overturned chairs. He caught up to her in the parking lot, grabbing her arm just as she reached for a car door. Lydia, stop! Please! She whirled to face him, tears streaming down her face. You don't understand, Jamel. They'll kill her. They'll kill Zora if I don't do what they say. The words hit Jamel like a punch to the gut. His daughter, the child he'd never met, was in danger. In that moment of shock, his grip loosened, and Lydia wrenched free. As she sped away in a stolen police cruiser, sirens blaring in pursuit, Jamel stood frozen in the parking lot. His past and present had collided in the most spectacular way, and he knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Back in the precinct, surrounded by the chaos of the aftermath, Jamel's phone buzzed with a text. It was from Martha. Everything okay? You've been gone a while. Miss you. Staring at the message, Jamel felt the weight of his two worlds pressing down on him. How could he explain this to Martha? How could he protect a child he'd never met from a danger he didn't fully understand? As Sergeant Coleman approached, his face grim with the news of Lydia's escape, Jamel knew that the next few hours would determine not just his future, but the lives of everyone he held dear. The storm that had been brewing in the shadows of his past was about to break, and he would need every ounce of his strength, skill, and integrity to weather it. The precinct was a flurry of activity in the wake of Lydia's dramatic escape. Officers rushed to and fro, coordinating search efforts and putting out APBs. Amidst the chaos, Jamel stood in Sergeant Coleman's office, his mind reeling from the revelations of the past hour. I need you to level with me, Rowan, Coleman said, his voice low and intense. Is there anything else you're not telling me about your history with Lydia or the Awakened? Jamel shook his head, feeling the weight of his superior's scrutiny. No, sir. I've told you everything I know. Coleman sighed, rubbing his temples. This is a mess, Jamel. A big, complicated mess, and now we've got a 4-year-old child potentially in danger. The mention of his daughter sent a fresh wave of anguish through Jamel. A child he'd never known, never held, was now at the center of this storm. What do we do now, sir? We found Lydia, Coleman said firmly, and we pray we get to her before the Awakened do. If what she said is true and they're threatening your daughter, this situation just got a whole lot more dangerous. As they discussed strategy, Jamel's phone buzzed again. Another message from Martha. Jamel, please call me when you can. I'm worried. Guilt gnawed at him. In the chaos of the day, he'd neglected to keep Martha informed. She deserved to know what was happening, but how could he even begin to explain? Go, Coleman said, noticing Jamel's distraction. Take an hour. Talk to your wife. You're going to need her support for what's coming. But Jamel, he added, his tone grave, be careful what you say. This is still an active investigation. Nodding gratefully, Jamel left the precinct, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. As he drove home, the streets of Los Angeles seemed different somehow, as if the events of the day had cast a shadow over the city he loved. Arriving at their apartment, Jamel took a deep breath before entering. Martha was waiting for him, her face a mixture of relief and concern. "Jamel, what's going on? I've been trying to reach you all day." Looking into the eyes of the woman he loved, Jamel felt the full weight of his predicament. How much could he tell her? How much should he keep hidden to protect her? "Martha, there's something I need to tell you," he began, his voice heavy. "It's about my past, about a part of my life I thought I'd left behind." Over the next hour, Jamel shared a carefully edited version of the day's events. He told Martha about Lydia, about their past relationship, and about the daughter he'd never known. He spoke of the awakened in vague terms, describing them as a activist group that had taken a dark turn. As he talked, he watched Martha's expressions shift from shock to hurt to concern. When he finished, the silence that fell between them was deafening. "Why didn't you tell me about this before?" Martha finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're married, Jamel. We're supposed to share everything." The pain in her eyes cut Jamel to the core. "I thought it was in the past," he said, reaching for her hand. "I never imagined it would come back like this. I'm sorry, Martha. I should have told you." Martha pulled her hand away, standing up and pacing the room. "A child, Jamel. You have a child out there. A little girl who might be in danger. How am I supposed to process this?" Before Jamel could respond, his phone rang. It was Coleman. "Rowan, we've got a lead on Lydia. I need you back at the station now." Torn between his duty and his crumbling personal life, Jamel looked pleadingly at Martha. "I have to go. We'll talk more when I get back, I promise." Martha nodded, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. "Go. Do what you need to do." "But Jamel," she added as he reached the door, "when this is over, we need to have a long, honest conversation about our future." The drive back to the precinct was a blur, Jamel's mind racing with the implications of Martha's words. He'd worked so hard to build a life with her, and now it felt like it was slipping through his fingers. At the station, Coleman briefed him on the latest developments. "We've traced Lydia's phone to an abandoned warehouse in East LA. It's an area known for awakened activity. We're assembling a team to move in." As they geared up for the operation, Jamel couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something bigger than they realized. The awakened had always been elusive, always one step ahead. Why would they slip up now? In the tactical van, surrounded by his fellow officers, Jamel's thoughts drifted to Zora, the daughter he'd never met. Was she really in danger? Or was this another of Lydia's manipulations? And if she was in danger, how far would he go to protect her? As the van sped through the night-shrouded streets of Los Angeles, Jamel steeled himself for what was to come. Whatever happened next, he knew that his life would never be the same. The shadows of his past had risen to engulf his present, and somewhere in the darkness ahead lay the answers that would shape his future. The tactical van came to a halt a block away from the abandoned warehouse. The air was thick with tension as Sergeant Coleman briefed the team one last time. "Remember, our primary objective is to locate and secure Lydia Carter. We have reason to believe she may not be alone, so stay alert." "Officer Rowan," he added, fixing Jamel with a stern gaze. "Given your personal connection to this case, you're to hang back. Observe and report only. Is that clear?" Jamel nodded, swallowing his frustration. He understood Coleman's decision, but every fiber of his being screamed to be on the front lines. This was his past, his child potentially at risk. How could he stand back and watch? As the team moved into position, surrounding the dilapidated structure, Jamel's mind raced. What would they find inside? Was Lydia really here, or had they been led into a trap? The order came through their comms: "Move in." With practiced precision, the SWAT team breached the main entrance. Jamel, positioned at the rear, strained to hear what was happening inside. The sounds of boots on concrete echoed through the night, punctuated by sharp commands of "clear." As each room was searched, minutes ticked by like hours. Then, suddenly a shout. "We've got movement on the upper level." Jamel's heart leaped into his throat. Before he could think better of it, he was moving, slipping past his distracted colleagues and into the warehouse. The interior was a maze of rusted machinery and crumbling walls. Jamel navigated through the debris, his training kicking in as he cleared each area. As he ascended a rickety staircase to the second floor, he heard voices, one of them unmistakably Lydia's. "You don't understand. I had no choice." Lydia's voice was high-pitched, frantic. A deeper voice responded, too low for Jamel to make out the words. Creeping closer, he peered around a corner and felt his blood run cold. Lydia stood with her back to a wall, her face a mask of terror. Before her stood a man Jamel recognized from briefings on the Awakened, Xavier St. James, the group's charismatic and dangerous leader. And there, clutching Lydia's leg, was a small girl with wide, frightened eyes. Zora. Jamel's breath caught in his throat. His daughter. She was real. She was here, and she was in danger. "You betrayed us, Lydia," Xavier was saying, his voice smooth as silk but edged with menace. "You were supposed to be our eyes and ears, not go running to the cops." "I didn't tell them anything," Lydia protested. "Please, Xavier, think of Zora. She's innocent in all this." Xavier's laugh was cold. "Innocent? In this world, you of all people should know better, Lydia. There are no innocents, only those who see the truth and those who remain blind." As Xavier reached for Zora, something in Jamel snapped. Training and orders forgotten, he stepped out from his hiding place. "LAP, freeze!" 3 heads whipped around to face him. Xavier's surprise quickly morphed into a cruel smile. Well, Officer Rowan, I presume? How kind of you to join our little family reunion." Lydia's eyes were wide with a mixture of relief and fear. "Jamel, please, help us." Zora, confused and frightened, clung tighter to her mother's leg. Jamel's heart ached at the sight of her, this child who shared his blood but was a stranger to him. "Let them go, St. James," Jamel said, his voice steadier than he felt. "It's over. The building's surrounded." Xavier's smile didn't waver. "Is it now? And tell me, Officer Rowan, does your team know you're in here? Do they know about your complicated history with our dear Lydia?" Jamel's silence was answer enough. Xavier chuckled. "I thought not. You see, Jamel, may I call you Jamel? You're in quite the predicament. Your loyalty to your badge, your loyalty to your long-lost love and child, your loyalty to that new wife of yours, so many competing interests. It's fascinating, really." "This isn't about me," Jamel growled, his grip tightening on his weapon. "This is about you and your crimes, the robberies, the manipulation, using people like Lydia to do your dirty work." "Crimes?" Xavier's voice dripped with mock indignation. "We're changing the world, Jamel, opening eyes to the truth. The so-called crimes you speak of, merely a means to an end, a way to fund our greater purpose." As Xavier spoke, Jamel noticed Lydia slowly inching towards a nearby window. Her eyes met his, and he understood. She was looking for an escape route. "And what purpose is that?" Jamel asked, trying to keep Xavier's attention. "Brainwashing people? Tearing families apart?" Xavier's eyes flashed with genuine anger. "We're waking people up, showing them the lies they've been fed their whole lives. The system you so proudly serve, it's corrupt to the core. We're building something better, something pure." As Xavier launched into an impassioned speech about the Awakened's vision, Jamel saw his opening. With a subtle nod to Lydia, he suddenly rushed forward, tackling Xavier to the ground. "Run!" he shouted to Lydia. "Get Zora out of here!" What followed was chaos. Lydia scooped up a screaming Zora and dashed for the window. Xavier, stronger than he looked, grappled with Jamel on the dusty floor. Punches were thrown, each man fighting with the desperation of their convictions. Through the melee, Jamel heard the sound of breaking glass. Lydia had made it to the window. But as he turned to look, Xavier seized the moment. A sharp pain exploded in Jamel's side. Xavier had pulled a hidden knife. Staggering back, Jamel felt warm blood seeping through his shirt. Xavier stood, knife glinting in the dim light. "You could have been part of something greater," he said, advancing slowly. "Instead, you'll die here, alone, a pawn of a corrupt system." As Xavier raised the knife for a final blow, a deafening crash filled the air. The SWAT team, alerted by the commotion, had finally reached their location. In the confusion, Xavier turned to flee, but Jamel, summoning his last reserves of strength, lunged forward and tackled him once more. As his fellow officers swarmed the room, securing Xavier and calling for medical assistance, Jamel's world began to fade. His last conscious thought was of Zora. Was she safe? Had Lydia gotten her out? As darkness claimed him, Jamel Rowan, decorated LAPD officer, newlywed and newly discovered father, couldn't know that his ordeal was far from over. The events set in motion in that warehouse would continue to ripple outward, touching lives and changing fates in ways he could never have imagined. The steady beep of a heart monitor was the first sound Jamel registered as he clawed his way back to consciousness. The sterile smell of disinfectant and the feel of crisp sheets told him he was in a hospital before he even opened his eyes. When he did, he found himself looking into the tear-stained face of Martha. She was holding his hand, her grip tightening as she saw him awake. "Jamel," she breathed, relief evident in her voice. "Thank God, you've been out for 2 days. 2 days. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He tried to sit up, wincing at the pain in his side. "Lydia? Zora? What happened?" Martha's face tightened slightly at the mention of those names, but she kept her voice calm. "They're safe." Lydia managed to get Zora out of the warehouse. "They're in protective custody now." As the fog in Jamel's mind cleared, the events at the warehouse came rushing back. The confrontation with Xavier, the desperate fight, the fear for his newfound daughter's safety, and through it all, the knowledge that he had broken protocol, potentially jeopardizing the entire operation. "Sergeant Coleman?" he asked, dreading the answer. "He's been here every day," Martha replied. "He's not happy about how things went down, but he says your actions probably saved lives." Jamel closed his eyes, relief washing over him. But it was short-lived as he looked at Martha, seeing the hurt and confusion still lingering in her eyes. "Martha, I'm so sorry," he began, but she held up a hand to stop him. "Not now, Jamel. You need to rest. We'll talk about everything later." As if on cue, a nurse entered, checking Jamel's vitals and administering pain medication. As the drugs took effect, Jamel felt himself drifting off again, his last conscious thought a jumble of faces. Martha, Lydia, Zora, Xavier, all swirling in a confusing mix of past and present. The next few days passed in a blur of medical checks, police debriefings, and tense conversations with Martha. Jamel learned that Xavier St. James was in custody, along with several other high-ranking members of the Awakened. The group's extensive network was being dismantled, evidence of their crimes coming to light across the city. But it was the visit from Sergeant Coleman that Jamel had been both anticipating and dreading. When his superior finally entered his hospital room, his face was a mask of professional neutrality. "How are you feeling, Rowan?" Coleman asked, taking a seat by the bed. "Better, sir. Ready to get back to work." Coleman's expression softened slightly. "That might take a while. You've got some healing to do, both physically and," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "professionally." Jamel nodded, understanding the implication. "I know I broke protocol, sir. I let my personal feelings interfere with the operation. Whatever disciplinary action you deem necessary, I'll accept it." Coleman sighed, leaning back in his chair. "It's not that simple, Jamel. Yes, you disobeyed direct orders. But you also potentially saved 2 lives and were instrumental in bringing down one of the most dangerous cult leaders this city has seen in years." He paused, fixing Jamel with a penetrating stare. "The brass is divided. Some want to make an example of you. Others are talking about a commendation. For now, you're on paid leave pending a full investigation." Jamel absorbed this information, a mix of relief and anxiety churning in his gut. "And Lydia? Zora?" Coleman's expression softened further. "They're safe. Lydia's cooperating fully, providing valuable information on the Awakened operations. As for Zora," he trailed off, seeming to choose his next words carefully. "She's been asking about you." The simple statement hit Jamel like a punch to the chest. His daughter, the child he'd never known, was asking about him. The reality of fatherhood, so long abstract, suddenly felt overwhelmingly real. "What happens now?" Jamel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Coleman stood, straightening his uniform. "That's up to you, Rowan. You've got some big decisions to make. About your career, about your family, both old and new. My advice? Take this time to figure out what really matters to you." As Coleman left, Jamel was left alone with his thoughts. The weight of the choices before him felt crushing. His career, the job he dreamed of since childhood, hung in the balance. His marriage to Martha, still so new, and now strained by the revelations of his past, needed healing. And then there was Zora, an innocent child caught in the middle of a storm she couldn't possibly understand. A soft knock at the door interrupted his reverie. Martha entered, her face a complex mix of emotions. "We need to talk, Jamel," she said, taking the seat Coleman had vacated. As Jamel looked into the eyes of the woman he loved, he knew that the conversation they were about to have would shape the rest of their lives. The truth, all of it, would finally come out. The good, the bad, the parts of himself he'd tried to forget. Taking a deep breath, Jamel began to speak, laying bare the story of his past with Lydia, his involvement with the awakened, and the fears and doubts that had led him to keep it all hidden for so long. As he talked, he saw the hurt in Martha's eyes, but also a glimmer of understanding. When he finished, the silence between them was heavy with unspoken questions and uncertain futures. "I love you, Martha," Jamel said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "But I understand if this is too much. If you want to walk away, Martha cut him off, taking his hand in hers. "I love you too, Jamel. And love, real love, it's not about perfect pasts or easy choices. It's about facing the hard stuff together." She took a deep breath, squeezing his hand. "I can't say I'm not hurt. I am. And I can't say this is going to be easy, because it won't be. But I made a vow to you, for better or for worse, and I intend to keep it." Tears welled in Jamel's eyes as the full impact of Martha's words hit him. He had expected anger, perhaps even an end to their marriage. Instead, he found forgiveness, understanding, and a love deeper than he dared to hope for. "What about Zora?" he asked, voicing the question that had been hanging between them. Martha's smile was small but genuine. "She's your daughter, Jamel, which means in a way she's mine too now. We'll figure it out, together." As they embraced, mindful of Jamel's injuries, both felt the first stirrings of hope. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with difficult conversations and hard choices. But in that moment, in a hospital room that had seen both despair and newfound hope, Jamel and Martha Rowan made a silent promise to each other and to the family they were building, to face whatever came next, united. Outside the hospital, the city of Los Angeles continued its endless rhythm, unaware of the small dramas and large decisions playing out within its walls. But for Jamel Rowan, cop, husband, and newly discovered father, the world had shifted on its axis. The future, once so certain, now lay open before him, full of both daunting challenges and incredible possibilities. The weeks following Jamel's release from the hospital were a delicate dance of healing, both physical and emotional. As his body mended, Jamel found himself navigating the complex terrain of his new reality. The comfortable routines of his life with Martha were now interwoven with visits from social workers, supervised meetings with Zora, and the looming specter of his professional hearing. Each encounter with Zora was a bittersweet mixture of joy and heartache. The little girl, with her mother's eyes and Jamel's smile, was shy at first, peeking out from behind Lydia's legs. But as the visits continued, she began to warm up to Jamel, her natural curiosity overcoming her initial hesitation. "Are you really my daddy?" she asked one day, her small hand tracing the outline of his badge. Jamel's throat tightened with emotion. "Yes, sweetheart, I am." "Where were you before?" The innocent question cut deep. How could he explain the complexities of adult relationships, the mistakes and misunderstandings that had kept them apart? In the end, he settled for a simple truth. "I didn't know about you, Zora, but I'm here now and I'm not going anywhere." Martha, true to her word, stood by Jamel through it all. She attended the visits when she could, slowly building her own relationship with Zora. It wasn't easy. There were moments of jealousy, of doubt, of wondering if she could truly embrace this child born from Jamel's past. But with each passing day, Martha found herself falling a little bit in love with Zora's infectious laugh and inquisitive spirit. Lydia, for her part, was a study in contradictions. Grateful for Jamel's intervention at the warehouse, yet wary of his growing presence in Zora's life. She cooperated with the authorities, providing crucial information that led to the arrest of several high-ranking members of the Awakened. But there was a haunted look in her eyes, a constant tension in her shoulders that spoke of unresolved trauma. "I'm sorry, Jamel," she said one evening after Zora had fallen asleep during a visit. "For everything, for keeping her from you, for getting mixed up with the Awakened. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I was so wrong." Jamel, still grappling with his own conflicted feelings towards Lydia, found it in himself to offer forgiveness. We both made mistakes, he said softly. What matters now is that we do right by Zora. As the weeks turned into months, a fragile co-parenting arrangement began to take shape. It wasn't perfect. There were arguments about schedules, about boundaries, about the best way to explain their complicated family situation to a curious 4-year-old. But slowly, surely, they found their rhythm. The professional consequences of Jamel's actions at the warehouse loomed large. The day of his hearing arrived, bringing with it a storm of anxiety. Jamel stood before the review board, his uniform crisp, his back straight, as he recounted the events of that fateful night. Officer Rowan, the chief began, her voice stern. Your actions were reckless, endangering not only yourself but the entire operation. However, she paused, her expression softening slightly. They also demonstrated exceptional bravery and a commitment to protecting innocent life. The board has decided to issue a formal reprimand to be placed in your file. You'll also be required to undergo additional training on proper tactical procedures. But in light of your overall record and the unique circumstances of this case, you will be reinstated to active duty, effective immediately. Relief washed over Jamel. His career, while bruised, was not broken. As he left the hearing room, he found Martha, Zora, waiting for him. The sight of the three of them together, his past and present united, brought a lump to his throat. What happened, Daddy? Zora asked, her small face scrunched with concern. Jamel knelt down, bringing himself to eye level with his daughter. Everything's okay, sweetheart. Daddy made some mistakes, but he's going to do better from now on. As they left the station together, this strange, beautiful, complicated family, Jamel felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, setbacks, moments of doubt. But for the first time in a long time, he felt truly whole. The sun was setting over Los Angeles as they drove home, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Jamel glanced in the rearview mirror, seeing Zora's sleeping face, then at Martha beside him, her hand intertwined with his. In that moment, he made a silent vow to honor the trust placed in him, to be the father Zora deserved, the husband Martha needed, and the officer his community could rely on. The shadows of the past would always be there, a reminder of where he'd been and how far he'd come. But as the city lights began to twinkle in the gathering dusk, Jamel Rowan looked to the future with hope, determination, and the unshakable knowledge that love, in all its messy, complicated, beautiful forms, was worth fighting for. The backyard of the Rowan home was alive with laughter and the excited shrieks of children. Colorful balloons bobbed in the gentle breeze, and a banner proclaiming, "Happy 6th birthday, Zora," stretched between two trees. Jamel stood at the grill, flipping burgers and hot dogs, a world's best dad apron tied around his waist. Martha moved among the guests, refilling drinks and making sure everyone was comfortable. And in the center of it all was Zora, her face glowing with joy as she played with her friends. As Jamel watched his daughter, he marveled at how much had changed in 2 years. The initial awkwardness of their blended family had given way to a new normal. It hadn't been easy. There had been therapy sessions, heated arguments, and moments of doubt. But they had persevered. Lydia, now working as a counselor for at-risk youth, sat chatting with some of the other parents. Her relationship with Jamel and Martha had evolved into a respectful friendship, bound by their shared love for Zora. Sergeant Coleman, now retired, arrived with a brightly wrapped gift. "How's my favorite goddaughter?" he boomed, scooping Zora up in a bear hug. As the party wound down and the last guest departed, Jamel found himself alone with Zora. She climbed into his lap, her eyes heavy with the exhaustion of a day well celebrated. "Did you have a good birthday, sweetheart?" he asked, smoothing her hair. Zora nodded sleepily. "The best ever, Daddy. I love you." "I love you too, baby girl," Jamel whispered, his heart full to bursting. Later that night, as Jamel and Martha cleaned up the remnants of the party, he paused, overcome by a wave of gratitude. "What is it?" Martha asked, noticing his expression. Jamel pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume. "Just thinking about how lucky I am, how close I came to losing all of this." Martha smiled, understanding in her eyes. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" As they stood there in the quiet of the night, the stars twinkling overhead, Jamel Rowan knew that he had found his true awakening. Not in the false promises of a cult, but in the love of his family, the strength of his convictions, and the knowledge that even the darkest nights could lead to the brightest dawns.